When my own son brought movers to my gate and the keypad flashed red, access denied, he looked at me like I'd vanished from my own life. I didn't shout. I simply watched as the law did what my words never could. That was the morning he learned a mother's calm can change ownership faster than anger ever could. And believe me, that was only the beginning. I woke before the house, the way I always did. The kettle hissed like it knew the rhythm of my mornings. Oatmeal bubbling low on the stove. Through the window, the porch light still glowed soft against the dawn. I kept it on for anyone passing early, a quiet promise that someone inside still cared enough to watch. My front door was painted the same peach shade Tom chose before he passed, and the chair he sanded smooth still creaked when I leaned to stir. Around here, peace was measured in teaspoons and steady breathing. The HOA rulebook said quiet hours until 8, but I'd learned that stillness had its own kind of noise, footsteps circling the lake, sprinklers starting, the mail truck pacing time. That calm cracked when I noticed Seraphine's phone on the counter. Camera light blinking, she clattered through my cabinets, humming like she owned the place. A mover's brochure peeked from her grocery flyer, and a tape measure rested beside my spoon. My piece started to taste metallic. She dropped her smoothie glass down hard enough to splash green on the placemat. "You should move into a nursing home, Vesta. We need more space." Her tone was clean, not cruel, just final. Dorian stood behind her, half smiling like a man caught in a storm without a jacket. "It's practical. Mom, safer. The stairs are tough." My spoon hovered midair. "Stairs don't make decisions," I said quietly. "People do." The words landed sharper than I expected. Seraphine blinked at me, then lifted her phone again, pretending to adjust a recipe angle. The blender roared to life, drowning out the silence between us. Outside. The HOA courier paused at the open door, heard enough to glance in, then kept walking fast. I pushed my chair back until it slid into its familiar groove, wood-scraping floor, a small border redrawn. I wasn't loud. I didn't need to be. I cleaned the drip of smoothie from my sleeve, then set my spoon down. She turned away, satisfied. Camera lens pointed just enough to exclude me from her morning reset. Later that morning, I stepped outside. The mailbox nameplate read Dorian and Seraphine Knox-Pelly. My name, Pelly, was crushed to the far edge, half visible under a screw. I stared long enough for Ivy across the street to notice. She tilted her head, frowned, then pretended to water her plants. My phone buzzed. "Network password updated," the notification read. I asked Dorian for it, keeping my tone level. "We'll send it once we organize things." "Mom," I nodded once. Organization, that's what they called it. My thermostat blinked. Manual mode disabled. My favorite radio station vanished from the presets. The little erasures were quiet, almost polite, but I'd lived long enough to know that silence could carry records. I took out my small leather notebook and wrote the date, time, and every word exchanged. Inside, Seraphine's mood board sat on the counter. Open concept, neutral palette, remove dated trim. Every note was a sentence on my memories. I wiped the condensation ring under her glass, not as a servant, but as a woman reclaiming her surface. I thought of Tom, how he said once, "Folks think manners mean surrender. Truth is, they're armor." I smiled to myself. My mother said something similar before she passed. "Polite doesn't mean powerless, baby. It just means you know when to strike." The doorbell rang. A stager's assistant stood there early, tape measure already snapping open like a countdown. Dorian scooped a folder labeled POA from the counter. I noticed it, said nothing. Let him think I missed it. Before I left the room, I placed my cup exactly where Tom's handprint had worn the finish thin. That spot belonged to us, not them. I turned off the porch light, the first time in years I'd done it before sunrise. If they wanted more space, I'd show them how much I truly owned. The light across the street flicked on in the middle of the day. Ivy Sova stood on her porch, sunlight catching the gray streak in her hair. She held up a small orange pill bottle, the kind she gave me after my blood pressure scare last winter. I raised a hand and she nodded. Our kind of code. Moments later, she crossed the street, moving like someone who's carried too many charts and too much truth in her life. "Morning, baby. You decent?" she called from the steps. "Always," I said, pulling the door open. That old warmth between us slipped into the house before she did. Her eyes skimmed the sideboard. The mover's brochure sat half hidden under my mail. She didn't comment, just noted it in that nurse's way, quiet but complete. I set out 2 mugs, letting the routine fill the silence. My hand didn't shake once. From the den, Seraphine's voice carried over, "Resetting the morning pantry!" Followed by the thunk of a tripod. Ivy's brows lifted. "She live streamin' or redecoratin'?" "Both," I said. We smiled, but my jaw ached from holding steady. Ivy took her seat like she'd been invited to church. "Headache? Dizzy? You take your pill?" The questions came like breath. She couldn't help it. "I'm fine," I said, "mostly." She reached for my wrist anyway, feeling the pulse. "Stress'll fool your heart faster than sugar ever could," she murmured. We both remembered that night. The sirens, her hands on my shoulders, the way she steadied my breathing while the EMTs tripped over my rug. That kind of care doesn't vanish. It roots. I told her about breakfast. Her mouth tightened, lines deepening around the corners. That wasn't concern. "Vesta, that was staging. They're dressing this house for a show you didn't audition for." I let out a small laugh, bitter and brief. "Then they picked the wrong star. We made a pact right there. If I ever felt my chest tightening, I'd text porch. If things got too thick, she'd flip her porch light on so I'd know someone saw me." Her hand rested over the table's wood grain. "Your house taught this block what home feels like," she said softly. That sentence anchored me more than prayer. She followed me through the rooms while I took inventory, my small rebellion. The thermostat read a new schedule I hadn't set. A beige throw covered Tom's old armchair, suffocating its history. My church fan was tucked in a drawer marked miscellaneous. That word stung worse than any insult. On the fridge, my Galveston magnet had been replaced with a list titled Shoot Days. The script of Seraphine's handwriting curved like a ribbon, but cut deep. Ivy didn't speak. She just watched, letting me lead. I jotted notes in my pocketbook. What moved, what changed, what I'd reclaim. "At my age," I said, "memory's just another kind of evidence." Outside, the HOA courier paced down the street, tucking flyers under mailboxes with machine precision. 2 walkers slowed to glance at my new nameplate. "Dorian and Seraphine Knox-Pelly?" They exchanged a look, sympathy folded in gossip's wrapping. Ivy exhaled through her nose. "Sugarland runs on eyes and fences?" I nodded, rearranging the porch cushions until the seams lined straight. "Then I'll make sure the eyes see order." She smiled. "That's the Vesta I know." A cardinal perched on the mailbox, feathers flaring against the steel. I wondered if Tom sent it, just to remind me whose name still belonged there. Back inside, Ivy guided me to sit. "Let's gather what matters," she said. Out came a notepad. ID, insurance, church contacts. I added my own, county clerk, notary, lawyer. She laughed when I labeled a pill box, porch light. "Girl, you're not playing around." "Never have," I said. The UPS man arrived with a box addressed to Seraphine. "Ring light equipment," he read aloud. "You the owner?" "I'm the host." I told him. That word fit better than I expected. Ivy chuckled low. "You don't need to outshout them," she said. "Just outlast them. And never sign papers when you're tired. Later." I sat in Diam's chair and counted my breaths. Seraphine's jars clinked like applause in the next room. Dorian peeked in. "Mom, you good?" "I'm steady," I said. He mistook steady for surrender. Again. I closed my eyes and remembered Tom sanding this chair, dust in his lashes, whispering that love was a structure you keep repairing. By the time Ivy headed home, the afternoon heat had turned gold. She pointed across the street. "I'm right there. Lights always on." When the door shut, quiet wrapped the house like gauze. Flyers slid through the mail slot, scattering across the rug. My phone buzzed, a message lighting up the screen. Facility tour confirmation, Sugar Meadows Senior Living. I didn't open it. I just smiled and wrote the timestamp in my notebook. If someone penciled my future into a calendar, they forgot I keep the pen. I sat at the kitchen table, the afternoon heat pressing against the windows. My phone lay face down for 10 minutes before I turned it over. The subject line still glowed like a dare. Facility tour confirmation, Sugar Meadows Senior Living. My name wasn't on it. Only Dorian's. Copied to Seraphine's influencer account and a realtor I'd never met. I opened it, reading slow, careful, Friday, 10 a.m. Contact on file, my son, a confirmation number stamped at the bottom as if my life had been scheduled between breakfast and brunch. I took screenshots, forwarded them to myself, and wrote every detail into my notebook. The message said care, but the logistics said removal. Those two words don't belong in the same sentence. If you plan my future without me, you just plan to fight. I texted Dorian. I saw the facility confirmation. Do not make medical or housing appointments for me without my consent. He replied in minutes, all lowercase like he was soothing a child. Just exploring options. Mom, don't overthink. I typed back, cancel it. No answer. The read receipt blinked, seen. I took another screenshot. Timestamps don't lie, people do. I inhaled deep. 4 beats in, 6 beats out. Years of church choir breathing kept me from shouting. My mother used to say, the loudest voice in the room is usually the weakest one. I decided to be strong enough to whisper. Next, I called the Fort Bend County Clerk's office. Hold music played, something that sounded like it came free with every government phone line. When the clerk answered, her voice carried that kind of warmth you only get from long days and steady patience. County Clerk's office. Parker speaking. Hi, baby, I said. I'm checking on an old deed and the process to record a new one. She walked me through everything. The fee schedule, ID requirements, witnesses, notarization rules. I wrote down every word, repeating details back until she said, you could teach this, ma'am. Clarity's cheaper than confusion, I told her. Thank you, sweetheart. Before hanging up, she offered the public search link. I said I preferred paper. Paper makes people slow down. She laughed, said she understood. When the call ended, I opened Tom's old folder labeled House. Warranty deed. The paper had softened with age but held steady. I placed a new manila folder beside it and wrote next in bold black letters. Inside, I tucked screenshots, notes about the Wi-Fi lockout, the HOA flyer with yesterday's date, and that cursed email printed twice. I added a checklist, notary, photo ID, witness, recording fee. Trust consult under that, Ivy's number, labeled emergency contact present at signing. Then I wrote one rule to myself. No signatures when tired, no signatures under pressure. The front door creaked. Dorian leaned against the frame, that familiar half-smile he used when trying to downplay a storm. Mom, you're reading too much into that email. I looked at him square. I'm reading exactly what it says. I held up the printed page, not to argue, but to anchor it in reality. Seraphine appeared behind him. Hair camera ready? We're caring for you, she said smoothly. Care doesn't CC a realtor. I replied, Care asks permission. Dorian exhaled, soft, patronizing. We just need flexibility, Mom. Then find it in your own plans, I said evenly. Not mine. He stepped back, and I brushed past them toward the porch. You can use the kitchen for filming, I added. Just leave my chair where it is. Outside, the air was thick but honest. A single ping lit up my phone. Another appointment confirmation. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock a.m. Home staging walkthrough confirmed. I didn't delete it. Some lessons need witnesses. I closed my notebook, feeling the weight of every word I'd written. If they wanted a tour, I'd give them one. Through every line I refused to cross. They arrived right on schedule. 2 women with matching polo shirts and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. The stager, Sub Aurelia, introduced herself while her assistant wheeled in bins of folded linens and racks of beige pillows like soldiers in uniform. The smell of lemon cleaner hit first, sharp enough to sting. Seraphine hovered near the doorway, whispering to her phone. Soft launch, don't catch Mom. Before hitting record, Dorian walked behind her, flipping every switch until the house glowed unnaturally bright. I sat in Tom's old chair, notebook open, my pen steady as I logged the time. 2:48 p.m. I wrote each item moved without my consent. Rug, lamp, memory. Sable snapped her laser tape measure open, the sound slicing through the quiet. "We'll lose the dated trim," she said. "Open the sight lines." Her assistant nodded, unrolling a drop cloth as if preparing for surgery. The word dated hung in the air longer than the lemon scent. I folded my hands in my lap and let silence make its own point. I'd learned that when you're quiet long enough. People show you who they think you are. The assistant turned toward Sable. "Is the owner here?" she asked. Seraphine smiled first, a soft lens kind of smile. "We are." That was the moment something inside me stood up before my body did. I placed my palm flat on the table, right where Tom's handprint had worn the finish thin. "You just did," I said. The room froze. Even Seraphine's phone caught it, the mic catching the tremor in the air like a verdict. Dorian cleared his throat, trying to smooth things. "Mom's just... she prefers paper." "I prefer respect," I answered, stepping into the edge of the frame. "And things that breathe." Sable blinked once, recalibrating her script. "What would you like to keep, Miss Pelly?" "The walls," I said, "and the story in them." Her assistant scribbled something down, but the pause that followed said enough. Outside, across the street, Ivy's porch light flickered once, faint but firm. My spine straightened on instinct. When the crew shifted to the kitchen, Seraphine switched to her cheerful host voice. "It's just staging, Vesta. Buyers need to visualize." I rinsed 2 mugs, keeping my movements slow, precise. "Fair enough," I said. "But vision doesn't erase the one paying the electric." Dorian slid a thin folder toward me, the corner stamped with 3 letters, POA. I tapped it once with my pen and pushed it back. "Not today." I wrote 1 sentence in my notebook. "Camera off when you talk to me." Then I closed it and placed it over the folder like a lid on something I didn't plan to open. Sable lowered her voice. "We'll schedule photos later, thank you, Miss Pelly." The "miss" carried more respect than anything I'd heard all day. When they left, the air shifted. The light through the blinds looked softer, like the house could breathe again. I called Noelle Shipman, Ivy's attorney friend. "I need to secure my deed," I said plainly, quietly, and by the book. She didn't waste time. "We can file a warranty update, a quitclaim, or move it into trust. Each keeps control in your hands." "That's what I want," I said. "Control." We reviewed what I'd need: ID, witness, notary, clear signatures. Noelle offered to send a mobile notary tomorrow. I set 1 condition: no documents when I'm tired, and I read every word aloud. "Deal," she said. "And good for you." After hanging up, I texted Ivy, "Tomorrow afternoon, be my witness." She replied with a porch light emoji and the words, "Always." The house had quieted to a hum when I laid Tom's old folder beside a fresh manila one labeled Next, and the porch light across the street burned steady, a metronome of courage. My kitchen clock ticked loud enough to feel like applause. A notification pinged. Delivery confirmed for ring lights and bins, for weekend declutter. I clicked my pen once and set it atop the new folder. "If signatures are the language they understand," I whispered, "I'll speak it before they learn the words." The next afternoon, Dorian slid a thin blue folder across my kitchen table. The label read POA, the kind of acronym that pretends to be harmless. Seraphine stood behind him, her phone face down for once, but her eyes carried the same lens look. Watching, framing. Dorian spoke in that half-gentle tone children use when they forget their mother still has teeth. "It's just temporary. Mom keeps things simple." "Simple for who?" I asked, tracing the edge of the folder with 1 finger. He gestured toward it. "You'd still have access to everything. We'd just handle the signatures." I flipped the first page and read the opening clause out loud. "Financial powers of attorney, unrestricted, revocable only by court." I looked up. "You call that simple?" I slid the folder back. Only predators rush signatures. Seraphine's voice, calm but sharp, cut the air. It's standard. So is courtesy, I said, setting my pocket notebook on top of the folder. The blue cover became invisible under the brown leather, as if buried by record. Before either could speak, the doorbell chimed, right on time. We'll be using the table now, I said. The notary entered first, crisp and professional, followed by Ivy Sova in her scrubs, still smelling faintly of antiseptic and lavender lotion. Ivy's presence steadied the room like an anchor. The notary, a woman about my age, checked my ID and read the attestation aloud. Are you signing of your own free will? Yes, ma'am, I said. My voice didn't tremble. Ivy sat to my left, her porch light keychain tapping a slow rhythm on the wood. I unfolded the conveyance prepared by Noelle Shipman, each clause clear as sunlight. Deed to Ivy Sova. No demolition or remodeling for 12 months. Property taxes handled jointly until reassessment. Every safeguard, every word deliberate. I initialed each page, slow enough to feel the ink sink into the fiber. Ink tells the truth, I murmured. The notary's seal hit the page with a solid thunk. Final, unflinching. Seraphine inhaled like she'd been holding her breath the entire time. Dorian's jaw moved, but no words came. I slipped the signed packet into a manila envelope marked Recorder and laid Tom's old deed beside it. The two folders touched, past and present shaking hands. Then I called Fort Bend County Clerk. Parker answered again. Bright as ever, Parker here. This is Vesta Pelli. I need same-day intake via courier. We went step by step. Fees, check number, cover sheet, parcel ID. Parker read the description. I echoed each digit. She gave me an intake number and promised posting by evening. I wrote it down in my notebook. Ivy texted me a single word. Got it. I called Noelle next. Filed and clocked. Thank you for the runway. I said, always. She replied, you just turned paper into armor. The envelope waited by the door for the courier, sealed and ready. I looked at it the way a general looks at a map before battle. Steady. No panic. When I turned back, Dorian was still standing there. Mom, why would you… I raised a palm. We use whole sentences here. He shifted tactics. We could have worked something out. You worked it out without me, I said. I returned the favor. Lawfully. Seraphine finally spoke, voice brittle. You gave it to a neighbor? To the woman who kept my porch light on when no one else noticed. I answered. Dorian's lips tightened. We were trying to help. You still can, I said. By remembering whose name's on the mortgage and whose blood's in these walls. Ivy, calm as ever, added. You'll get your copy once the clerk posts it. Her tone wasn't smug. It was administrative. Factual. I turned to Seraphine's phone. Camera stays off when you talk to me. Keep it that way. A knock came. A courier in a brown vest. I handed him the envelope. Received the stamped receipt. A minute later, my phone pinged. Received. Indexing tonight. Another notification followed. HOA gate credentials update request submitted. A new turn in the gears. I poured tea, set my cup in the groove Tom's hand once wore smooth, and watched the sunlight drift across the floor. By nightfall, the gate would learn the new name, long before my son did. At dusk, I sat on the porch with a cup of chamomile when the sound of tires on gravel drew my eyes toward the gate. The keypad blinked red. Once, twice, then thrice. 3 sharp beeps followed by the word denied. Dorian leaned forward, tapping the code again, his face catching the last strip of sunlight like someone realizing too late the rules had changed. Behind him, the moving truck idled, its hazard lights pulsing orange against the brick columns, a silent alarm. Seraphine stood off to the side, her phone held chest high, thumb poised over Go Live. When she spotted Merritt Kraft, the HOA courier across the cul-de-sac, she thought better of it. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I simply texted Ivy one word. Porch. Her porch light clicked on a second later. Our signal lived. The mover leaned out the cab window. Ma'am, we cleared to enter? Not until the roster's right, I said evenly. Dorian's hand gestured wide. It's our place, he said, and stumbled on the word like a child tripping over a lie. Seraphine hissed, People are watching. Let's just get this done. I took one step back from the walkway so her camera couldn't frame me as the obstacle. The gate was the story, not me. Merritt crossed the street, clipboard tucked under his arm. Evening. Miss Pelly. We'll need the current owner of record or written access. Call the county clerk, I said, handing him my phone. Intake numbers in the text from Parker DeLuna. He dialed, put it on speaker. The line clicked, and Parker's voice came through, steady as ever. Fort Bend County Clerk, DeLuna speaking. This is Merritt with Bridgewater Cove HOA, he said. We're verifying intake? Parker confirmed. Received at 2:15 p.m., indexed for posting. Grantee listed as Ivy Sova. The mover gave a low whistle that carried farther than anyone's shouting. Merritt scribbled notes, radioed the gatehouse. Update incoming. Deny access until roster reflects current record. Seraphine's lips tightened. Her hand hovered again near the phone. I met her eyes and said quietly, Camera stays off. She looked away. Dorian exhaled hard. What do we need to do? He asked Merritt. Written authorization from the owner or wait until the roster updates, Merritt said, polite but firm. Across the street, Ivy stepped off her porch. She didn't rush. The badge from her hospital shift still clipped to her collar. Evening, she said to Merritt, then turned to me. You holding up? Steady, I said. She showed her ID and the notarized copy Noel's runner had sent. Merritt examined the seal, nodded. Gatehouse. Confirm pending owner, he said into his radio. Grant single entry to movers for exit only. No unloading. Dorian blinked, confused. Neighbor? Really? Ivy's reply was crisp as a fresh chart note. Towed, the neighbor who called 911 when your mother couldn't breathe. That silenced even the crickets. Merritt taped a small laminated notice to the gate. Roster update pending. Access requires owner authorization. He looked to me. Copy for HOA file? Of course. The mover shut his door and said to Dorian, We'll circle back once it's sorted. The truck reversed slow. Brake lights painting the pavement red, Seraphine muttered. This looks messy online. Real life isn't a grid, I told her. I handed Merritt a printout of the 12-month no demolition clause. He scanned it, nodded again. Ivy's porch light glowed steady, the kind of light that doesn't ask permission to shine, through my window. I could just make out Tom's chair, still where it belonged. Parker texted a few minutes later. Indexed and live, I typed back. Thank you for the confirmation. You keep things running right. The gate rolled shut, its hum fading into the night air. Dorian stood with his car keys dangling in his palm like loose change, useless until earned back. I turned, walked inside, and placed 2 envelopes on the table, one labeled keys, the other next. By morning, the mailbox would wear a new nameplate, and this time, I wouldn't be the one turning the screws. The next morning felt lighter, like the air had been scrubbed clean overnight. I stepped outside with my mug, steam curling into the cool front. Ivy was already at the curb with a box of shiny metal letters and that nurse's calm she carried everywhere. You ready? She asked. I nodded. We picked a straight font, nothing fancy. She wiped the face of the mailbox with a cloth, then handed me the first letter, an S, her last name, not mine. It didn't sting the way I thought it might. She held the stencil steady while I pressed in the final letter. The click was soft but final, like a drawer closing after a lifetime of clutter. There it is, she said. Merritt Kraft from the HOA walked over, clipboard in hand, snapping photos for their records. Owner signage updated, he said. Scanning the QR sticker, he smiled. Efficient work. Ladies, my phone buzzed. County clerk notice. Index complete. The deed was live, searchable, verifiable. Paper had won. A neighbor walking his dachshund nodded at the mailbox and said, Guess that's settled. Before strolling on, I thought to myself, some mornings don't need trumpets, just proof and peace. After Merritt left, I called the utility office, confirming the transfer date. The representative thanked me for my thorough record keeping, which made me laugh. HOA's auto email arrived minutes later, portal updated. Owner Ivy Sova. They asked me to verify gate codes, so I passed the task to her. Temporary access for me, I said. Until I'm settled." She nodded. I placed 2 envelopes in Merritt's hand, one labeled keys, one documents. Inside were the no demolition clause, every copy accounted for. He pinned a laminated notice at the gate. "Contractor entry requires owner authorization." He thanked me by name. Again, down the block, Seraphine's SUV idled. The engine cut when she saw the mailbox letters glint. She didn't step out. I didn't wave. I wrote in my pocket notebook, "When a house changes names, so does the weather." By noon, a pickup rolled up, contractor crew, hard hats, clipboards. The foreman called out. "Demo for Knox Pelly job, kitchen and wall tear down." Merritt intercepted. "No demo approvals, owner Sova. Need written permission." Dorian pulled in seconds later. Seraphine right behind. "This is harassment," she said. "Already rehearsed." He flashed a folded document. "We're calling a civil standby." The Fort Bend deputy arrived calm as a breeze, asking for IDs, checking paperwork with steady eyes. He took his time. No rush, no nerves. He verified the stamped notary copy, pulled up the county index on his tablet, and read aloud, "Owner of record, Ivy Sova." He looked up. "Contractors need her authorization. Everyone else, off the curb." The foreman tipped his hat and packed up. "Didn't know, ma'am." Respectfully. Seraphine's jaw locked tight. Dorian just stared at the mailbox, its silver letters gleaming in the sun. The deputy handed the papers back to Ivy. "That's what the law's for," he said. "Keeps the peace." "Thank you," I told him. "We'll let the paper do the talking." By afternoon, the subdivision's Facebook group had 2 videos, the red denial from last night and today's deputy verification. Comments stayed civil. Neighbors over 60 prefer rules over gossip. Someone tagged a senior rights nonprofit. Good to know the process. Across the street, Seraphine's phone glowed with an email she didn't want. I caught the line reflected in her windshield. Brand partnership paused. Optics concern. She shut the laptop so fast the sound cracked the silence. Dorian watched her, then the mailbox again. His face softened in a way I hadn't seen in months. He returned alone an hour later, letter in hand. "Can I leave this?" he asked. "Paper travels better than voices today," I said. After he drove off, I brewed tea, opened his note on the porch. The handwriting was careful, steady, the kind you use when you want to be understood. He wrote about the remodel, about space and future, then confessed the part I needed. "We did it around you. Not an apology, but truth trying to grow roots." He ended with, "What will it take to still be your son?" I underlined it once. Then wrote my reply on a blank card. Whole sentences. No cameras. Ask. Don't arrange. Visit where I live, not where you want me to. Sunday, 3 p.m. Bring empty hands. I left it under a smooth river stone on the porch table. Some directions don't need GPS. That evening, Ivy walked me across the street to my new apartment. The manager handed over a single key. Clean place, quiet, window facing my old yard. I set the kettle on the stove, slipped Tom's photo in a drawer. Private piece. From the window. I watched the movers return, read the notice, and leave again. The street held its breath, then exhaled. At dusk, Ivy flicked her porch light twice, our signal before locking her door. My phone buzzed. Sunday, 3 p.m., empty hands. D. I placed the old keys in an envelope marked past and slid it under Tom's picture. In the morning, I would step back inside one last time, not as the owner, but as the woman who decided when the music stops. The morning air was cool and still, as if the whole street had paused to listen. I unlocked the front door of the house one last time, quietly, without ceremony. The blinds were open, dust motes drifting through the early light like slow confetti. I didn't cry. Nostalgia doesn't deserve tears every time it visits. I walked through each room, touching memory checkpoints. The groove on Tom's mantle where he kept his keys, the kitchen notch where his hammer once slipped, the pencil marks along the hallway from when Dorian was little. I didn't erase any of it. From my pocket notebook, I read the list I'd written before dawn. 3 things I'd take with me. Tom's service photo, the porch light keychain Ivy had returned, and my recipe cards, grease-stained but true, on the counter. I left a sealed envelope labeled Cease and Desist, attached with HOA policies and the civil standby report number. Courteous, firm, final. I placed another small envelope on the mantel labeled Past Returned. I took a single photograph, not for posting, only for proof. Before I stepped out, I whispered, "Thank you for sheltering me, even when it hurt." Then I locked the door and texted Ivy one word, done. Back in my apartment. Noelle's courier arrived with a manila packet. Inside were the full index from the clerk's office and the notarized trust schedule. The subject line of Parker's email read, recorded and indexed, legal music to my ears. I reviewed each clause before signing: primary beneficiary, my living care fund, contingent, Ellie's education account, and the porch light grant, a neighborhood fund for elders who keep an eye on one another. Dorian's bequest remained, a token amount bound by 3 conditions: no coercion, no defamation, no entry without consent. I initialed the page with the steadiness of someone who had already survived worse storms. At the bottom of my file cabinet sat the old APS report, the one marked Potential Elder Financial Exploitation. I drew a clean line across the front and wrote in bold ink, Withdrawn owner of sound mind. I slipped it into a new folder labeled Proof of Peace. It wasn't revenge. It was insurance against memory's revisionists. I emailed Noelle. All instruments executed, read-only copies for parties as needed. Then I noted in my little book, roots kept, branches pruned. By noon, my phone buzzed again. Seraphine's sponsorships paused pending optics review. I didn't smile, though my tea tasted sweeter. A local reporter called, wanting a perspective on generational wealth disputes. I replied, documents tell it better. I'm retired from public opinion. I forwarded the cease and desist template to Noelle for safekeeping, blank fields ready for anyone tempted to test boundaries. Ivy stopped by after her shift. She read the trust clause about the porch light grant, then looked up, eyes soft. You turned your mess into a safety net, she said. That's not mess, I told her. That's fertilizer. At 3 sharp, Dorian arrived. No cameras, no props, just empty hands. We sat on my porch, knees nearly touching. I read from my page. Whole sentences. No cameras. Ask, don't arrange. Visit where I live. No talk of nursing homes unless I start it. He opened his mouth, stopped, then began again. I was wrong, he said, slower this time. We wanted to help, but we made you disappear. I nodded. Help doesn't erase the person you claim to love. I handed him a copy of the trust's conditions. This is how we rebuild, on paper and in person. He studied it, then looked at me, eyes wet but clear. You still want me around, he asked? If you come as my son, not my project, I answered. I reached for my tea. Steady. Care isn't a remodel, I told him. It's a chair and a listening ear. By dusk, I stood at my window, tea steaming between my hands, across the street. Ivy tightened the screws on the new mailbox letters. The name Sova gleamed under the porch light. I whispered, looks good on you. Inside, the kettle clicked off automatically, a sound that meant normal life again. A text arrived from Dorian. Sunday dinners? Here, not there. 1 plate to start, I replied. I placed the old house keys in an envelope labeled Past and tucked it under Tom's photo, outside. Ivy's porch light blinked twice. Just like the first night this began. Next Sunday, a small hand would slide a drawing under my door, and the porch light would blink twice.